really did happen. Because that's the one thing Jesus staked his entire message on. He said, here's the sign that I'll give you, the resurrection. And he prophesied that that's what was going to happen. Over 500 witnesses saw him alive again. His enemies could not disprove it. They came up with all sorts of theories. They admitted that the tomb was empty, didn't they? They even admitted that he said he was going to rise again. Remember when they went to Pilate and said, we want you to seal the tomb because we remember how that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. They admitted that he said he's going to rise. So when you have your enemies admitting your message, that's pretty powerful evidence from a historiographical perspective. You know, from the historians, when they look at it, they say, man, if the enemies agree, that part's probably true. They're not going to give you things to help your case. So if they said it. If you look at the way that the disciples' lives were transformed, what happened to Peter the night of Jesus' arrest?
He denied him.
He denied him 3 times. He was running, and most of them were running other than John, who stayed pretty close to the proceedings. Peter tried to, but then he denied him over and over again. The rest of them ran away. They were cowering in fear. And pretty soon, within 7 weeks, Peter stands up on the day of Pentecost and gives the least seeker-sensitive message of all time. Telling the Jewish people, a huge crowd of thousands of Jews, that they had just taken their Messiah and crucified him. That was Peter, the guy who was running away from a servant girl just a little bit earlier. What happened to him? He knew Jesus had died, and then he saw him alive again. And a few chapters later, what do we read? Peter and John are arrested, and they're beaten, and they say, stop preaching in Jesus' name. What do Peter and John say? Hey, you guys can decide if that's right or not, but we're not going to stop teaching. We can't help but speak about the things that we've seen and heard. Where do we find them next? Right back in the temple. What are they doing? Teaching people about Jesus rising from the dead. No matter where they went, that's always, always, always what they taught. You can read through the book of Acts. Every single sermon delivered by an apostle in the book of Acts is focused on the resurrection. Every one of the sermons by an apostle. That's always what they preached about. That's what they focused on. Because that's what they saw. They knew Jesus was dead, and they knew he was alive again. We also have unhelpful information. What do I mean by that? Well, remember last night we looked at the number of angels at the tomb. Was there 1 or 2? Were they men or were they angels? We see how the different accounts give different information. If they were in collusion, they would have gave all the same information. But here's another problem. Who is the first person at the tomb? Who's the first person who gets to see Jesus? A woman. Not just any woman. What woman? Mary Magdalene. Now, why is it a problem from a Jewish perspective to have a woman being your eyewitness? Because their testimony was not considered valid in that culture. Sorry, ladies. That's just the way it was. That's not because the Bible said that. It's just that's how that culture was. But Mary Magdalene wasn't just any woman. Mary Magdalene, Erica, what happened to her?
He cast out 7 demons.
She was a woman who was a demoniac. She had 7 demons cast out of her. By the way, if you want reliable witnesses, she's not your first choice. Okay, that's just the way it is. If we're making this up, there's no way in the world Mary Magdalene's the first eyewitness. No way. She's the last person you would ever pick. So why do the Gospels tell us she's the first person? Because she was the first person. That's why. That's why. It's because it really happened. Nobody would make that up. We have the empty tomb. Again, even the Jewish religious leaders admitted the tomb was empty. Even the Nazareth inscription that we talked about earlier, this decree from Emperor Claudius mentioned, we have evidence the tomb was empty. And there's all sorts of alternative theories that have been promoted over the centuries, and nothing has come even close. In fact, you really almost have to grab 2 of these theories. One to explain how the tomb became empty, and one to explain how people kept seeing Jesus alive again. So you gotta have like hallucinations or visions or something like that over here, and you gotta have somebody stealing the body over here. And yet both of them are so extremely unlikely, and I gotta help you guys out with this. If you take it a really extremely unlikely scenario and you have to mix it with another one that's really unlikely, that doesn't make your case stronger. It makes your case much, much weaker. And yet that's what they are forced to do. We've talked about this in the